This episode of Critical Hit is being brought to you by Harry's. Join the 10 million who've already tried Harry's. Claim your trial offer by going to harrys.com/criticalhit. Why? Well, I've been using Harry's razors for years, and I get a close, comfortable shave. And I know you're saying, Steven, but you got a beard. I got to shave other parts, right? I got to get under the neck. I got to get, the other places. And Harry's razors always have given me a close, comfortable shave. I love the handle. I love the ergonomic design. I love the fact that it grips and it stays in place. Not like some of those other razors that I've tried in years past where I get a little bit of water on the razor handle and bloop, it goes flying across the bathroom right when I'm trying to get into that one spot. Harry's founders were tired of paying for razors that were overpriced and overdesigned. They knew a great shave doesn't come with gimmicks like vibrating heads, flex balls, or handles that look like spaceships, tactics that the leading brand has used to raise prices for decades. No. They fix that by combining a simple, clean design with quality, durable blades at a fair price. Harry's bought a world-class blade factory in Germany that's been making quality blades for over 95 years. They've received over 20,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot and Google. Here's the best part. Harry's replacement cartridges are just $2 each. That's half the price of the Gillette Fusion Pro Shield. Are we allowed to say that? I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but that's half the price of the Gillette Fusion Pro Shield. All Harry's blades come with a 100% quality guarantee. If you don't love your shave, let them know, and they will give you a full refund. Here's what you can do. You can get a $13 value trial set that comes with everything you need for a close, comfortable shave. You get a weighted ergonomic handle. You get a 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip and a trimmer blade. You get the rich lathering shave gel. And, of course, you get a travel blade cover. Listeners to this show can redeem their trial set at harrys.com/criticalhit. Make sure that you go to, are you listening? harrys.com/criticalhit to redeem your offer and let them know that I sent you to help support this show. So thank you, Harry's, for supporting us all these years, and thank you, listeners, for supporting us for 500 episodes. And now let's see what happens in episode 501. Welcome to Critical Hit, a Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this week. And we just wrapped up last week, episode 500 of the Critical Hit podcast. And I think for us, it's a major milestone because it is a show that has been going continuously with very few interruptions for 10 years. And I don't know if I've committed to any one game for 10 years. I know there's somebody who started Risk in like 1989 and is still playing that game.
Yeah, don't trust those people.
Well, Dungeons & Dragons has been a very, very interesting experience for me. Now, I know a lot of people are like, oh, we want you to read all the emails that you sent us. We could do that, and that's fine. I'm not someone who is a big fan of, reading the congratulations because it just feels like, hey, like a great, self-aggrandizing kind of stuff. And so, I appreciate everyone who sent in emails and everyone who is sending us the tweets and all the news outlets who decided to skip us over. I'm totally joyed with all the response that people have been sending us over these last couple of weeks. And we do read all the emails. And we do appreciate that. But I thought instead for this 501st episode that we'd all sit around and finally get to the one big request that people have been asking us since, I don't know, episode 100 or something like that. When are you going to play some Star Wars? So here, because this is our 501st episode, we're finally going to play a Star Wars game for you.
Are we?
No, we're not.
I call Yoda.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. But instead, I thought we would just kind of talk about some of our favorite moments, some of the things that we like the most, some of the things that we hate the most. I thought we could talk not just Dungeons and Dragons, but talk about some of the various other systems that we have played and enjoyed, and just kind of talk about that. Rodrigo, I got a question for you. Mm-hmm. What has been the most challenging part of running a 4E game all the way up to, level 30?
Us idiots.
Yeah, but you guys have it could be any system, and that would be the most challenging part. No, I guess specifically 4th edition, it's that 4th edition characters stand start out as highly resourceful tanks, and they only get tougher and more resourceful as they go. So it's pretty difficult to scale encounters because it really just takes a little bit of like a couple bad rolls to swing an encounter from challenging to overwhelming.
Yeah.
And a couple good rolls to have a challenge or to have an encounter go from challenging to not even a thing.
I understand that frustration because Brian and I are playing another game that our listeners will hear eventually. But we've been recording it with Dr. Brad Will, and he will roll out just these horrible monsters that, deal like tons of damage. And then suddenly we're like, boom, 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 you're dead. And the encounter's over. And you can just see on his face, like, but I spent all this time coming up with these creatures and making sure that they were going to be a match. And then all of a sudden you guys just come in here and do one or two things and it's over. And
what system?
It's Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Yes.
Never even heard of that.
Who's the creator?
Rob Schwab.
Yeah. So people will. It's very interesting because it's minimal dice. It's like a D20 plus a D6 to roll for your attack, and then for any damage, it's all D6 damage. So it makes the math really, really easy. The goal of that system is that you level up to 10, 11, because you have a level 0, and then the game's over. And depending on how you run the game, you can level up every time you sit down to have a session. So there's not like XP or anything that you have to do with that. So, but it's also been interesting to see him run the tables to say, okay, here's all the monsters that should make this game very difficult for you guys. And then suddenly it doesn't. So I can sympathize with you, Rodrigo, but at the same time, I can also curse you because sometimes there have been creatures that we've had to battle that have just been like, oh my God, this is the point where we get a TPK. I hope something is coming next week that will save us. So
yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to land that. That's probably the most challenging thing about 4th edition, and especially 4th edition at high levels, because other than that, the game is actually really tight. There's really not much that you have to worry about in previous editions, and I'm guessing 5th edition as well. I haven't played that as much. There are things like wish spells. There are things like auto kill spells that the party can have, and things like that really make it so that the very first thing you have to do is create this layer of, this is why your mega superpowers won't work in this fight, and then you get to come up with the fight. Otherwise, the fight is over immediately.
Well, you said 4th edition is fairly solid. And I would probably agree with you, considering it's the only version of Dungeons and Dragons besides that 1.5e encounter that we've played. But certainly one big contribution that I think that you have made to Dungeons and Dragons in general, to the entire game world system, is Lord Kensington's rules, skills challenge
skill
rules.
Challenges.
Yes. And
I think so. I'm surprised at both the staying power and fame of the Lord Kensington rules. I've heard stories of people using them and somebody else being like, "Hey, those are the ones for critical hit." Like, it's like when two people that I don't know personally connect over those rules is actually kind of a big deal for me. Like, people run these at cons and they look them up online and they incorporate them into their game. So yeah, I think if I have one claim to fame ever about Dungeons and Dragons, it's probably going to be those skill challenge rules.
Yeah, I would say not even Dungeons and Dragons. I'll be like looking on other forums for other systems, and it's like, yeah, I use these rules for skill challenges in Savage Worlds, and it's totally
Yeah, I mean, I found it for Pathfinder, specifically referencing your rules.
so see, Rodrigo, you're famous.
All right.
For
How do I
famous
trans-
Lord now time for the residuals to come in.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. Clearly, once they get off this 5e nonsense, Wizards of the Coast will come a knocking.
Yes, this nonsense. That's their most popular edition.
Yeah, most popular edition ever.
Yeah. And I'm sure this is not one, because that was one of the interesting things about 4th edition is, what were we, like 5 years and then they switched?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? I don't think they're going to switch from 5e anytime soon.
No.
I really
No.
don't. Sam, do you have any thoughts on do you think that they're going to move off to the 5.5 or the 6.0?
Oh, no
7.3.
more soon. I mean, like, especially right now, Pathfinder is moving to their second edition after 10
Yes.
years,
Mhm.
and it's causing, like,
Mhm.
exactly the same level
Another,
of panic and frustration that the 3.5 to 4E did.
Yeah.
And I think is likely to create the same level of market fragmentation. So all Wizards really needs to do is kind of sit back on its laurels, keep putting out some, a few good books each year, and raking in the money.
And not sue the streamers. That's
Well,
right
that's
now.
their,
That's all they have to do.
That is really kind of the bread and butter, right, for Wizards of the Coast, even though they may not be getting money off any ad revenue or any merchandising that comes from a game stream, but it's free publicity.
Yeah.
I mean, even any game that people are streaming, whether it's something that we do on Munchkinland, which is another one of our shows where we sit around and play board games, and we've done Fantasy Flight games, we've done Blacklist games, we've done who does Pandemic, Z-Man games.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done all that stuff, and as can be seen with Dungeons and Dragons and the popularity of streaming that, or Evil Hat with their Fate system, it really is in the best interest for the game companies to encourage people to stream the games, providing that they're within limits, because that just encourages more people to go out and check out those game systems, and thus it results in more sales.
Yep, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been Wizards of the Coast. Like, there's all this like secondary economy for Magic the Gathering, and they don't shut that down for the same reason. It's building an ecosystem that they can profit off of.
Yeah, and so I'm glad we've been able to do this and get people into Dungeons and Dragons when it was 4th edition, and get them, for many people just like me. Many people have never played Dungeons and Dragons before until I said, Rodrigo, you've got to run a game for me because you keep talking about this nonstop on the Major Spoilers podcast. And then we sit down and did it, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. Let's continue. So I expect that there are a lot of people who are like me, who are just like, what is this? How does this work? I need to know more. I need to play it or listen to it. And now they're just like, and we get these emails all the time from people that are like, oh yeah, this is how I got into GMing a game or DMing a game, because I heard you guys play it and I figured out how it worked from your gameplay and from your shows. That is what was the catalyst for me to get out there and do a bunch of game mastering themselves. So I kind of really like that Critical Hit and all the other shows that do this have been able to have an impact on gameplay around the world. Matthew, you are an old-time gamer.
I am 3 months younger than you, thank you.
But as I said, I didn't start playing Dungeons and Dragons until I was
40?
Almost 40, yeah.
Yeah.
You've been playing it probably since you were a teenager in the 80s.
Yeah, I've been playing it since before the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon was on Saturday mornings.
So what are some big changes that you have seen in Dungeons and Dragons over the last 40 years?
Well, everything has changed almost completely. And I think, the running gag that you keep seeing is nobody knows what to hit armor class 0 that THAC0 actually was.
Gross.
I remember being super, super mad in a young game. I was maybe 15 or 16. And my game master, I'm almost certain, was doing this wrong. But we were in an encounter, and he was like, there is no way for you to ever even get a hit on this character, no matter how good you roll. And I'm like, well, that's frustrating. I don't think that's the way the rules work. But here's the thing about the game. Your rules are only as good as the person enforcing them. And I feel like there's been a lot more, especially in 4th edition, codification of if-then statements and those weird moments of if something incredibly stupid that shouldn't happen does happen, here's how you keep your players from mutinying and killing you. And I really appreciate that. I love the fact that the game has taken into account the fact that one time in 5,000, some stupid thing is going to happen. And you know that Matthew's going to be the one that makes that stupid thing happen. And here's how you deal with that stupid thing. And of course, Rodrigo is one of those guys who I trust him in a gaming setting to go, you know what? That doesn't work for anybody. We're going to make up something different, or we're going to adjust that, or we're going to work with, something different. But I do like the fact that even in 5th edition, which I had some, I don't want to say trouble, because the last time I said I had trouble with 5th edition, people were haranguing me in the forums. That's back when we had forums. But even in 5th edition, I feel like they've hammered out things that aren't going to happen very often, but you still have, this is exactly how you handle that terrible, weird situation.
Mm-hmm. Sam, when did you listen to Critical Hit before you started playing with us?
I did not. And then when Rodrigo asked me to join, he was like, if you want to catch up and listen to Critical Hit, you're welcome to, or you don't have to. And I thought it would be more fun to go in as blank as a player as I would be as a character. So I wouldn't have to try to, check myself for what I knew out of character. And so, yeah, I still haven't gone back and listened to any of those episodes.
Is that intimidating? Though, when it's like, oh yeah, we're already up to level whatever we were, 15 or 20 or something like that. Was that intimidating for someone to say, hey, come join our game and get in on this action, even though you've never played with any of these people? And oh, by the way, there's like 50,000 people that are going to be listening to your...
It was the latter part that was definitely the more intimidating. I was honestly terrified of playing for an audience. I was like really just worried about, I was to some degree worried about playing with people I didn't know and how I'd get along with you guys, but I was mostly worried about how those 50,000 people would perceive me, because I was like, I think I can, make a decent enough impression on a few people I'm playing with, but like that's a lot of other people. And just how I know that like the gaming community is often a community that doesn't react especially well to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because we had a change where a character, Adriana, had to bow out because of other commitments and other things that were going on. And so her leaving and you coming in was certainly going to cause a little bit of trouble. But fortunately, we had other games that were kind of buffering that time to kind of smooth that transition for other people. But me personally, when it comes to strangers, I'm kind of that same way where I'm like, I don't know if I want to just open the door to strangers, without really kind of getting to know them a little bit. But it's been interesting because Rodrigo was this way. He was like, yeah, I got these two guys that I play with down at the university. They should be okay to be playing this game with us. And that's how Rob and Brian got in.
Nice.
These two guys.
Well, I think that's how it was. He's like, yeah, I know two guys that could come and play. And he didn't really tell me anything about them until they showed up. And then it was a year later before Brian was like, yeah, I was a student in one of your classes.
Oh.
Yeah, it was when you taught econ for that one day.
No, it was interactive systems design. Yes. And Brian sat in the back and didn't really do much the entire semester. He was a quiet person.
By saying, taking it to fill a requirement.
Yeah, he did what he was. He did his assignments, but he was a quiet person.
Yeah. I think that Rodrigo did a really good job when he kind of like was. When he brought me in, when he was messing with things, when he also had like Casey and George also guest starring, it was really unclear. And like also some of the existing characters didn't appear until later episodes. So like kind of kept everyone on their back foot, which kept it from just being like, why do I have to accept like Cousin Oliver being part of the band right now? And more along the lines of like, well, a lot of things are changing.
Right.
So,
and there was a lot of change, right? Because we had a character death. That occurred, or never heard from again, but a character exiting the game.
Dead.
And then we had a second character entering the game. And then, of course, as you said, Sam, Rodrigo had this great idea of, let's throw everybody off and bring in these other players. And do you think that was a successful move, Rodrigo? Because there were people that were freaking out going, when are these people going to show up? Where's so-and-so? And why isn't this here? And I think Rob was the last one to show up in the game. Or Ket was the last one to show up in the game, and so that had people freaking out as well.
Yeah, Ket's always the last one to show up. I feel that it was successful in that, what I wanted from the beginning of that season was for it to be literally a big mess. Like, I didn't want anybody to know what was actually happening. Not the players, not the audience. A lot of the NPCs didn't know what was going on either. I wanted it to seem like it was this big, overwhelming thing. And then as the players continued to investigate and move through the world, to have things become more and more clear and more focused. And part of that was having extra players. Part of that was introducing the players that were going to stick around in the game in a piecemeal fashion. These are all techniques that I had used in other games and had proven effective before. And the test of fire was this all going to work when you had an audience listening? But I don't know. I watch a lot of TV, and this is exactly the sort of thing that makes shows exciting, right? It's like you see the opening title and there's like a cool guy with like a weird hat and a sword, and he's not in the first episode and he's not in the second episode. Where's that guy with the sword going to show up? What's his deal? It's like that's Ket. Ket's in every opening montage of Critical Hit, but he doesn't show up until 3 or 4 sessions in.
Yeah. And for people wondering, where is Rob? Rob is at work right now. So he is literally the last person to show up to the game. And so that's why you won't be hearing his voice this week. But don't worry, he's not gone yet.
Well,
I can do my Rob impersonation; it'll be fine.
No, that's okay.
I can do a really good Rob.
So
he does kind of specifically comment on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
he sent an email and just kind of talking about some generalized topic stuff.
Yeah, Rob sent an email about some of his memories, and he does mention basically have him coming in late. He's enjoyed playing so many different characters over the years. Being the perpetual Sixth Ranger is entertaining to him at this point. He actually misses being branded a brand new character as the episode starts and figuring out where this new character is going to take him. Which actually reminds, I guess that's a different topic.
He talks about Bravest Rabbit.
Which I'm just now getting the connections there to your book.
Yeah. What was who was the first person on the show that wasn't Rodrigo to run a game? Was it me for the GM session?
Yeah. I think it was you. Yeah, you ran the GM roundtable thing.
Okay. And then was Rob next with the dinosaurs
and paladins,
which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then Brian with Modern City.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then Brad Will, I think, was next with the Yellow Light and the Call of Cthulhu game. So let's see.
Was Modern City before or after 5th Ed?
Before.
Yeah, it was definitely before. But yeah, so it would have been me with a Dungeons and Dragons game. Rob, what system? We use Dungeons and Dragons.
It was 4th edition.
His was also 4th edition.
Yeah.
Then Modern City was Fate Accelerated.
Mm-hmm.
The Yellow Light is Call of Cthulhu. And then Sam, you're here. You join up with us, and then right as soon as we finish that season of Void Saga, suddenly it's like, okay, Sam, let's see what you can do. How about you run a game now and get us onto that old Pathfinder?
That was like even more terrifying than joining the show as a player, because it's like, well, when you're a player, you got a lot of time to like kind of sit back and listen, especially as a player with a new character, because I could just be like, why don't you tell me everything about you, and I'll listen and absorb and like not have to be on the spot. And then it's like, oh, now I'm running this show and I'm teaching you guys a new system, and like I'd never done anything like that for broadcast before, and so I was super scared and like didn't want to like let you guys down, but I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, no, it did. It did. I really enjoyed that. I think the fans, there's I don't know what it is. I am really open on this show to play a lot of RPG systems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I totally fell in love with Fate Accelerated. I was nervous as heck the first time that I had to just GM a game, because that was the first time I'd ever done a GM game, and Rodrigo was like, nope, I'm out. Don't count me to be there to be your support blanket. And I've really enjoyed Call of Cthulhu. I really enjoyed Pathfinder. Can't wait till we do Starfinder and all the other games that we have planned out. And I think that's interesting to see how the different systems work. But I know that there's a lot of listeners who just have this, I'm a D&D and I hate Pathfinder person, and some people who are like, nope, I'm Pathfinder all the way, screw this D&D. And I don't understand. Maybe one of you guys, Brian, maybe can explain the hate between those two systems, why they're at each other's throats.
I think it's just a lot of one true gameism, which is not really a philosophy I subscribe to. I mean, I certainly have my own opinions on various systems and what I like and don't like, but Yeah, I don't know. People like they really focus in on one system and really are all about mastering the system and knowing the ins and outs, and will tell you like, how dare you pick any other level 3 spell than haste?
Oh, right,
and,
right.
And they're all about that. And I'm not talking about personal friends at all in this situation. But yeah, I mean, they really focus on just knowing this one system in and out. And, me, I just love trying different systems when I see something that has some interesting mechanic that I just really want to try. Like, oh man, I just can't wait for Kamigakari to get the official English translation, because its weird dice pool mechanic for resources seems a lot of fun and want to try that out. And there's always a new system that I'm itching to try.
Yeah. I want to talk specifically Void Saga for just a little bit here. Rodrigo, do you have a favorite moment in regards to Void Saga, the story that you've told, that, like a certain situation or an event or something that really sticks in your mind that says, yep, this is Critical Hit, this is a Void Saga?
I think for me, it was probably kind of this period of time over this last season, not Devilish Research, but Legacy of Ghosts, because in my games, there is very frequently like very early seeding of things that are going to happen later. And I feel like most of the payoff for all of that stuff happened during Legacy of Ghosts, and getting to see everybody play and getting to see the audience enjoy these things where it's like, oh, this thing that was mentioned in the very first season of Critical Hit is actually relevant now. These characters that appeared very early on have actually continued to do things behind the scenes, and now here they are this whole time. For me, I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, and it's something that I think a lot of game masters don't usually get to do because their games don't last that long. You know, Critical Hit or Void Saga is the longest game I've ever ran, and it allowed me to do things like that because, you can always seed things in, and then, if your game falls apart, your game falls apart, and, it sucks, but whatever. But with this, I'm actually like, I get to do this payoff, and I feel like the last season had the majority of it. It's kind of like, if you look at the payoff from the first, from almost every season up until then, there's something in Legacy of Ghosts that pays off. And then this current season is kind of I don't know, like a weird love letter to Celestial Crusade, right? It's like a lot of the stuff that was going on there is relevant, but not that much. You guys haven't run into like a ton of NPCs from there or something like that. It's a different story. But I think Legacy of Ghosts really had a lot of that payoff.
Well, speaking of like seeding things, and something that was just one of these oh wow moments, and why sometimes listening to all of our shows over and over again we'll discover new things, is at one point we were literally months ahead in our recording versus release schedule, which we're not, so much right now. But at one point, and I had to have been Lords of the Feywild, maybe? Which is the one that had Plague Jackal show up in?
That was Lords of the Feywild.
Okay, so Lords of the Feywild, Aurum is having, these weird things that are happening as he's doing his Fey step or as he's teleporting. And at one point, Rodrigo describes, here's this jackal, coming, Aurum sees this jackal coming over a hill or something like that. And it's just this kind of one-off thing. And then later on, I'm playing Plague Jackal and doing all these things with it. And then I never put two and two together because we're just playing the game. And it's not until I was finally editing that episode where Aurum jumps and sees the Plague Jackal off in the distance that I'm like, oh, that is pretty cool. So it's those little kind of moments that when you catch those things that have been dropped in, that I think make this game pay off in a lot of different ways and really warrant multiple listens. As far as personal fan moments that I have of Void Saga, certainly the Tower episode from early on, because I had very, very early become very attached to Aurum. And then it was this whole thing about, oh my God, is my character going to die? What does it mean for my character to die? I don't want him to die. And that was really kind of a I don't know if you remember, Rodrigo, but that was kind of like
I do remember that.
Bit of a personal crisis for me, because it's like, oh my God, I've shaped this guy and built him up, and here he is, and now he might be dying. Oh, this is horrible. Another favorite is the pumpkin patch incident that what's it, Flailing Wings, I think is who it is on YouTube, has animated. I watch that thing all the time because it just cracks me up. It was a great moment of just pure impromptu play between Rob and I, that I don't know if we had anything, if there was an out for that until, Rodrigo stepped in and said, oh yeah, Camus isn't here either. And just kind of let it go with that. I like that. I love the sad moments when, between Orym and Torque, I always thought are very good and touching. I think those are probably my top 3 moments from Void Saga so far, right? Matthew, do you have some moments?
Oh, always. I think probably the moment that really endlessly sticks with me is Torque and Orym in the library.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yep.
Yeah, the Torque and Orym in the library scene was amazing, and it was hard to do. I feel like, both of us were at a point where we were both being affected by this, and it was hard to have that emotion and be in character at the same time, which I thought was really amazing. And of course, the discussion at the end of Lords of the Feywild, that really, really hard discussion that we had, and the tiny bit of swift and blinding violence, and finally, coming to the decision that we all had to make. And this is all stuff that we were doing on the fly in character. Literally, I don't know if anybody else, the only thing that I knew was I had an email from Rodrigo that said, okay, this may happen. Think about what you would do. And I'm like, okay, what would I do? What should I do? And we're having that in character discussion. And it was one of those moments where it didn't feel like I was recording a show for all of our fans. It felt like I was having a discussion as a character. It felt like acting. And it's always fun to be, completely subsumed by your acting. I'm a little Stanislavski, and I'm sorry. I'm kind of a jerk like that. But I think that was the hardest one for me. And then, of course, the moments where Rodrigo's brilliance becomes the centerpiece, because I am constantly having people talk to me about, hey, remember that wonderful thing with Torque and the kitten? And I'm like, yeah, I got to enjoy it just as much as you guys did, because that was literally Rodrigo abstracting something really wonderful and really neat into the story that I don't think would have worked as well if we were actually, trying to role play it real time. I love those moments where, given these characters and the building blocks and all of the world building that he's done, Rodrigo takes this little shining pebble that he might have found in, the ashes of my Stanislavski, and shines it up and goes, holy crap, here's a diamond, fling. And then the whole world is like, wow, that's brilliant stuff you did there, Matthew. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Rob says, 2 things that come to mind: stealing Rafaga's head and escaping Magublistan. I actually had what I thought was a great plan for getting out of the new Goblin capital and solving some crisis for Diamond Throne in all one swoop. I wanted to take the goblins at the traders in the southern border, offer that up as a chance for our release, and then put pressure on the king and the queen. Best plan I never got to attempt. What about you, Brian? Is there a favorite Void Saga moment for you?
Man, I mean, I still think like the season 2 finale is pretty powerful. The Smith passing, us being jerks and disintegrating the equipment of the dead Eladrin in the cave.
Oh yeah,
that was a moment.
Sam, what about you? I know you've only been around for the 2 seasons, and now maybe that you've heard some of these stories that we're referencing, you'll go back and listen to all the rest.
Nope.
Never.
Boo. Boo, Sam, boo.
Maybe once the game is finally actually over, and I won't have to like keep anything separate. But every once in a while, like you guys will tell me a story in character that I won't know, and then I get to have this authentic reaction as my character that I wouldn't have, and I like that a lot. I'd never joined a long running game before, though I've had other people join like long running games that I'd been playing in, and I honestly like thought that was a weird pleasure. It was like getting to like hear these like weird nonsensical stories and be like, wow, you guys are absolutely crazy. I guess I'm along for the ride now. But honestly, one of my I just enjoyed, Rodrigo did like a lot of work preparing me with background for what the Southern Continent was like. And I really enjoyed just like slowly trickling that information out to you guys and like getting to do things like, well, why don't we go like find safety in Monster Town? You guys are all like,
Monster Town? No.
Like, that sounds like a terrible place. And just things like that, kind of getting to be a source of information. I also really enjoyed some of the like surprising, just the ways some of Rodrigo's setups have worked out really well. Like in when we were doing the dimension hopping, we were at that one place and like it's like, oh, you're in these comfy robes and everyone's super nice and Orm's locked in a crystal, and it's just like, oh boy, like just like that kind of bait and switch of what's going on gets me every time.
Yeah, Brian, what about you? Oh, I already asked you, didn't I? Okay, sorry. I was like, okay, have I done everybody? I think
Brian,
I have.
Better answer. Go.
Yeah, better answer, Brian. Let's edit that in.
My favorite thing that Brian did was not on the show. There was a really tense and kind of like, there's not tense, but maybe intense conversation between a PC and an NPC. And right in the middle of things, as things are kind of like moving along, like Brian just has like the most monstrous sneeze. He just like sneezed so loud, and it just like cracked everybody up. And like Steven cut it out of the show, but if you go back and listen to that, you can hear is like, and I think it just places the characters kind of like being, kind of overwhelmed by the gravity of what's happening. But yeah, that came after like 10 minutes of laughing.
Yeah.
Because it caught everyone by surprise. We have cough switches, but this sneeze just came from another dimension to Brian, and he just couldn't make it to his cough switch.
Yeah. We do a lot of editing for the show. For those people who are on our Patreon, I did a live stream, this would have been a couple of months ago, where they got to watch me edit an episode and go through the process and everything. And I think, as great as storytellers as we all are, a lot of the craft of the final craft and the final polish of the show comes in the edit, where we can take out things that are not part of the story. We can take out the long pauses while people try to figure out, what they want to do next or how their character mechanic works in a particular situation. If someone has to run and use a bathroom, we can remove all of that stuff to present a really solid, what I think is a tight storytelling process. This is not related to the editing, but we have been, or I have been, putting the shows up on YouTube as well. So they'll go up, and they're about a week behind because I want people to be the podcast first. So first the show goes out to the patrons, then to everyone else, and then it goes up on the YouTube channel. And Rodrigo, you've been having a fun little game with Critical Hit on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, my favorite new pastime is to watch Critical Hit on YouTube and turn on the robo captions, like because we don't caption the show, so
right, we don't do any closed captions.
YouTube's AI closed captions it, and A, because it's a fantasy game, B, because we're weird, and C, because very frequently everybody's talking over each other. The captions come out super weird.
I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, so that's over at our YouTube channel, Major Spoilers Video. And you can check that out. And occasionally Rodrigo will post some screen caps that he takes with his phone of some particularly funny bits that also bring a chuckle to me as well. We have played a bunch of other games, and to be honest, if you were to tell me, Stephen, what's your favorite part of Modern City, I kind of went nuts with that thing. I loved every single moment of that game and that system, I there is nothing about that game that I didn't like. I liked all the characters. I liked the environment. I love that it was a truly cooperative environment that we built in that. I enjoyed that all to heck. The Call of Cthulhu game was interesting because, again, it had a new GM that none of us had ever played with, and also had a guest person that came in, a friend of Rob's, and we didn't know her, and we sat and played this game, and we were using the ambisonic sound, the binaural microphone, and that created a whole weird different experience, and some people really didn't like that. I thought it was very cool. There were a lot of people who did respond, oh yeah, I put on the headphones, and there are times when that creeps me out whenever I hear something happening or someone whispering in my ear. We'll be bringing that back with the Shadow of the Demon Lord game that we're running. That's also recorded in the same process. And the interesting thing about those games is there's no editing on those games, because otherwise suddenly the environment would ka-chunk out and then come right back in. But I really enjoyed that madness mechanic in Call of Cthulhu, and also I kind of enjoyed the fact that my character went insane twice, or
two different
characters went insane.
Your character, it was just totally...
maybe a little bit of both. Maybe a little bit of both. Of the other games, Matthew, what are some favorite moments of any of the other games that we've played? I enjoyed my character of the professor in the other game that Brian had run just recently, the Haze of Shadows.
Yes.
The Haze of Shadows. Haze of Shadows had that incredible ending. that incredible ending. And the wonderful part about it is, as someone who was on the show as it's unfolding, I understood something about that ending that no one else probably, if you're a listener, you wouldn't pick up on. That was not prepared. That was not something that anyone knew was coming. And it was something where Brian is like, doopy doopy doo, here's this world, you're going to do this stuff. And it started slowly unrolling. And when we came to Steven's last line, that killer last line, I was just like, oh my God, he's going to say it. He's going to say it. And it's one of those moments that could not have happened. I don't think you could have scripted something that wonderful. And it was entirely a synthesis of Rodrigo's role play and Steven's role play and Brian's world building into a moment where I literally squealed.
Well, yeah, because it was really weird because Rodrigo was clearly had the upper hand in that fight.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone was out except for me. And it was just like, this is not how I thought this was going to play out. And, we're talking about how no matter what happens, you two are just going to cancel each other's powers out until Rodrigo has the upper hand. And it was like, well, crap. But then for whatever reason, Rodrigo's like, oh, you know what? I give up. And I don't know if it was because out of, man, I don't want this fight to continue anymore, or if you had some other idea, but it was just like, oh, the game can't end just that easily.
Yeah. Such a wonderful ending. I mean, I like the moments where those things happen. I'm still enamored of the moment during Dinosaurs and Paladins, where we were doing something and for some reason Stormwind was up in the trees, and we were making the jokes about Stormwind scampering through the trees, and every time you would do your scampering through the trees, I would go tee. And so now in my head, Stormwind Brokenhorn always goes tee and kicks up his heels, whatever he's doing. I just love that, that bit sticking around. And of course, the real moment of truth for me was the moment when we were in Modern City and we're doing our Modern City thing.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody's like, hey, what about this? And I'm like, oh, did I mention the car can fly? That's the moment. That is the moment where Jetstar came together. That is the moment where Jetstar was leaping fully formed from my head, like something your 7th grade boyfriend could tell you about from, a myth. And I love that moment. I love pretty much all of Modern City, but I love that moment.
I think there's still a lot of people upset the way the Modern City had that cliffhanger, and we've never revisited that. And people are just like, what? What happens next?
Well,
it's a comic book, friends.
Sam, what about you? Is there a moment in some of the other games that we've played that really stand out for you?
I thought I really enjoyed a lot of the different sections of when I was running Weird Western, and got to like, oh, thank you, and got to like basically like I had based part of that game around the party, and it kind of played out exactly how I wanted it to. I thought all your reactions were perfect. I just loved getting to, like, mess with each of you individually. I loved the slow dawning realization of what had happened to that dryad that you guys had.
I'm so mad at you. I'm so mad at you.
So here's an out of story bit about my character creation. I had created my character when Sam wasn't around, and I sent her this, and I said, "Here are all my roles," and the roles were actually pretty high. And Sam was like, and so we were chatting back, and I don't remember if you were in there. Oh, we were in Roll20 together, and she's like, "I'm going to have to ask you to re-roll those again." And the numbers were all higher the second time. So there was that was a fun moment outside of that I appreciated. Let's see, Rodrigo, why don't you tell us a quick story?
Story. Let's see, about other games besides Void Saga.
Okay.
I definitely enjoyed getting to play an actual Mexican character in Weird Western. That was fun for me.
That was fun because afterwards I started, the things that you were peppering in, I started just researching, and you were giving us real, actual historical tidbits and knowledge and important things all the way through that. And the whole time I was just like, he's done his homework and now he's expecting us to go and check it. And I'm like, I hate you so much.
Well, the thing is in the end, it's a D&D game, right? Just like you can be like, I hail from Baldur's Gate. You can say you're from Durango and nobody has to check, right?
Right.
But yeah, it was fun. It was interesting. I enjoyed talking to Sam about it. I enjoyed getting to bring that to the table. It's funny because a lot of the time when you talk to your game master, the direction that it goes is you'll be like, I want to do this, and the game master will be like, well, that doesn't really work in this setting or whatever. But
right,
it was kind of backwards a lot of the time because Sam would be like, well, what about this? And I'm like, that's not really how that works for like federal police in Mexico or in like Mexican Catholicism. It'd be like, so we'd have to like sit down and figure out something else. So it was a weird reversal of being a player and like coming in with my own setting is like, have you ever heard of a wonderful place called 1860s Mexico?
But it worked out super well because like I wanted a Western setting and I wasn't really sold on like where in the West, and it's like Rodrigo came to me and is like, I want to be from Mexico. I'm like, all right, well that helps me narrow things down. And then Brian came and is like, I want to be a vigilante, and I was just like, well, then I started thinking like Zorro railroads, and it's like Mexican and American railroad it is. And yeah, I think that back and forth that we did with your character helped build like a really strong anchoring for the world, and it's one of those things where as a player I appreciate going back and forth with a GM to do connect world building to my characters, and as a GM I do as well because I think that both the players and the world benefit from a cohesive structure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Rodrigo, I do have one question for you.
What's up?
In the Weird Western, I believe that early on, maybe episode 1 or 2 of Weird Western, where we're getting to know ourselves, I believe. Now, I know this happened for me, and I believe it happened for you too. Did you have a point where you realized that your accent and my accent were clashing and we both had to pull it back? Because I know I absolutely did.
So I think really when I realized that we were both doing accents, I did have a moment of like, I don't know how this is gonna go for the audience if there are two guys with wacky accents in the party.
Right. Well, yours wasn't wacky. Yours actually very accurate. Mine was, fifth dimensional wacky, but that's fine.
I think honestly, what ended up happening is that it's hard to do an accent. Like it's like what you're hearing now. This is my accent, and there's like a little bit of, Mexican stuff that or Spanish stuff that creeps in here and there when I'm talking. But, Chema's accent is, maybe at some point was my accent, but it's not anymore. So I was pretending. So as the game went on, I just wasn't always completely conscious of the accent. So I had this like probably smaller version that I like kind of leaned on to get me through. But there were definitely times when I was like, I really should have phrased that backwards. After I had already said something, I was like, if given Chema's amount of English knowledge, I should have said what I just said backwards.
Right.
But it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, I think by like if you listen to both of our characters at the beginning of that game and you listen to them again at the end of the game, it'll sound like they've had some ESL classes on the quick.
To me, it felt like two people who speak differently, who start to speak like each other over time, which I loved having a story where, first of all, Sam let me get away with talking like that.
But I regretted it so much.
Oh, now I'm hurt. But the fact that we had two characters who were doing that, I really appreciate it. I like that. It felt to me like it was something that you could more kind of sink your teeth into. And granted, I feel like there are times when I go a little pantomime in all of my characters, and that's only halfway by design. But I really loved the amount of stuff that came into your character, and I kind of felt bad when it seemed like I was making you pull back on the stuff that Chema was doing, verbally and vocally. And I was like, it's a fun voice, though. It's a very fun voice. I forgot to tell you.
Oh, yeah. No, it's all good. I mean, Chema was really an example of getting to come up with a bunch of stuff. And then if something comes up, it comes up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And, it's like, already playing getting to play, we play a lot of fantasy stuff, and it's like, Latinos don't exist in space unless they're green, according to the Marvel universe. So it was nice. It was nice to get to do that. And, I have this foundation of things that I can always pull out and use. So it was like, in and of itself, it was good. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed then the interactions with everyone else. Because actually, Chema's backstory was pretty complicated itself. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he was the only one that was coming in from that direction was also helpful, because he just had this like extra stuff that he could add to the conversation without it being all about him.
Yeah.
Brian, I really liked your using of like when like periodically using like Mexican sayings. I thought that just like are really, obviously one of the benefits of getting to play someone that is like you is that you had that deep well to draw upon, and I thought it enriched the character a good deal, and for that matter, enriched the world to be able to bring those to the fore.
Brian, did I ask you what your favorite non-Void Saga memory is?
You had not. Man, I mean, I still, pretty much as Matthew already said, the end of Haze of Shadows.
Oh, God.
You and Rodrigo
what a great ending, my
pulling
God.
that out. I mean, I didn't plan that. I didn't mean to set that up. You guys just took that ball and ran with it. And, I mean, kind of the same way just with Modern City overall. I mean, that was... Going into that, I was coming in with a blank slate because that, to me, is a big appeal of like the Fate system and using like the accelerated, especially with a very light system that, we can come together as a group and make a world and then see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll ever return to Modern City. One thing that I
should ask.
I'm sure it'll come back around about the same time the next issue of Battle Chasers happens.
There you go.
Oh.
I just really expect that if we ever get back to Modern City, it'll be called Modern City X.
Yes.
And it'll be written by a different creative team.
Yeah, maybe we'll just have to see. Boy, it sure would be a good time to join a certain Patreon.
Now with 300% more chainsaws.
One thing that I enjoyed about doing Modern City was I was like, how do I craft this world that we've built up with this mythology? And so I was like, oh, I'm going to try to introduce every show with something a little different. Yes. So there was this, hey, here's this piece that would have come out in the 1950s that is encouraging people to come to Modern City. And so I was able to get Scott Johnson to come in and record that whole bit. I think Rodrigo wrote that.
Yep, I wrote that, yeah.
And, edit that together. And I was like, oh, that worked out really well. And then I was like, as we're introducing these other characters, I got at the time... I got Brian Ibbott to do this NPR morning edition kind of thing where, hey, we're going to go interview people about, their favorite characters from Modern City. And I got a class that I was teaching at the time just reading off a bunch of random names, including some of the names from the game, and then editing that together like it was a man on the street and getting the department chair for the department I was teaching for to kind of do the woman's voice in that. And then another older colleague of mine who was more than happy to do, oh, yeah, I remember the Modern Man. And doing all those bits were really a lot of fun. And I had some ideas to get a couple of other well-known internet celebrities, streamers who just happen to stream on the same night that we do our Major Spoilers podcast to do a kind of funny in the morning kind of show from Modern City. Maybe I'll have to address that someday. I wonder. Patreon.com/Major Spoilers.
Yeah, I've got to love Scott Johnson's old-timey announcement.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, there's Kat. Kat's always the last to arrive.
Hi, guys.
Rob, we kind of already read some of your email responses about some of your favorite moments for Void Saga, and we're just talking about favorite moments from any of the other non-Void Saga games. And so why don't we hear your voice for a little bit?
All right.
That's enough.
Yeah, that tracks. No, I loved Steven hamming it up when he was the DM. I'm looking forward to finally getting to do that again. To listen to that again.
Oh, man, it's going to be such a different game. I'm very worried about this game, let me tell you.
You did great the last time, and you have so much more experience under your belt at this point.
Yes.
Almost like 10 years more of experience.
Yeah.
Like 500 episodes worth of experience.
Yes. It'll be interesting. I'm very nervous because Brad Will, I think, says it best. We're not the brightest bulbs. In that when we ran the Cthulhu game, it was a mystery. It was a detective tale. And we missed every single clue that he dangled in front of our faces. And again, a little foreshadowing of things to come. We have been accused of not paying attention to all the clues and dangling in our faces again. And mine is definitely a detective tale. And so I'm very worried that the clues will be so far buried that people won't be able to figure out the mystery.
You haven't had a mystery with me in it. I'm terrible about wrecking mysteries for people. So,
well, we'll see what happens. That was the other thing. That was the other thing. Is somebody blurts out the answer in the very first episode, and it's like, okay, well, so much for that.
That's the real worry a lot of the time with mysteries is that you want them to be solved at the right time, not too early,
right.
not never, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you want them to seem fair.
Mm-hmm. Right. You want the clues to get people there, but get people there on a timetable that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't want to have, I don't know, a thing where you're dangling clues for like a whole season and a half before you're just like, man, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Rob, I have fangs, for God's sake.
Rob, back to you with some favorite non-Void Saga moments.
Playing in both of Brian's games is great. Superheroes are always fun.
Mm-hmm.
I like the whole how terrible Free Agent was about actually keeping his identity secret.
Yeah. Well, Rumblebee was kind of the same way, right?
Yeah.
And oh yes, by the way, people, I do know that there's a truck out there that has a Rumblebee on the side. Thank you for the tens of thousands of photos that you've been sending me over the years.
That's fantastic.
It is.
Yes.
Did you see the picture of it though? I can forward you the picture.
I have not seen the picture.
Now, if we can get a Rumblebee standing in front of the sign for Orem, Utah, then
that would be awesome.
Then we'll be sad.
Oh my God, that would be great. Haze of Shadows was fantastic. I think Powered by the Apocalypse system might actually be my favorite RPG system at this point.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, like I've been playing a Monster of the Week game outside of this, and
Cool.
it's also great. Like, I really like how that system functions.
Well, keep an eye out for the Tome of Mysteries coming out, which has a few more rules adjustments.
Cool. And then I think the most memorable fight in the Weird Western was the train fight.
Yes.
I loved that fight
times.
so much. It made
Speaking
me
of us
so
being
happy.
idiots.
Running people over with a train makes Sam happy.
I mean, like I said, I made a bet with Kevin, my husband, before, because I was telling him about the fight, and he's like, "Do you think, like, how many people do you think you're gonna hit with the train?" I'm like, "Everyone."
I was expecting a bit more time this second
man,
time.
I may have to revisit my detective game.
Don't forget to don't underestimate how stupid your players can be.
Yeah.
Definitely don't overthink it.
Oh no, I'm
And,
not. In fact, I've only got about 40% of the game done because I've got all the clues, or most of the clues, and then the rest is going to be based on things that you guys do.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so it's going to, it's not, it's a, game shouldn't be on the rails, in my opinion, except unless you're on a train, literally, to
being run
New
over by a
Malachau
ghost
or
train.
wherever. Yeah.
We're going to be off the rails. It's fine. It's what we do.
But I see this as not quite a choose your own adventure, but there are many paths that you could take, and I've got some contingencies for those, but I don't know, exactly what's going to happen. So a lot of that's just going to be not random lookup table type stuff, but there'll be some element of that.
Yeah, I think your first trick is going to make sure that Rob and I are on the same page, so that our idiocy cancels itself out.
It'll be interesting because I need to talk to Rob a little bit more about his character and how his character and Brian's character interact with one another.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't
Do
know
I
if
hate Brian's character? Because I can play that.
I think it's more the other way. Likely.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because I don't know if it's one that you will want to play all the way, but we'll see what happens.
Playing as though I like Brian is difficult.
Yes. See, that's going to be the weird thing. So that is something that's coming up down the road. Don't worry. We still have 6 more levels to go, Rodrigo, on the Void Saga.
Yeah.
So I just want to take a moment and say thank you, Sam. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brad Will. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you. Who else? Ian. Thank you. Who was the other girl that played in our Call of Cthulhu game? What was her name, Rob?
Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. And everybody who has been on the show. Rulesman Alex. I'm forgetting
Lauren
who else.
And the band.
Yeah, and everybody
backstage here at SNL.
Everybody who's been on Critical Hit, Casey,
Sure.
George, everybody who's been on the show and made the show happen. Just thank you so much for everything that you have contributed to this show. I really do not think that this show would be at 500 episodes if it wasn't for all of you who show up every week or every couple of weeks to sit down and play a game and enjoy our company with one another and spin some crazy tales. And I hope that we are able to have this conversation again when we hit the 1001st episode. But until then, we got some games to record, ladies and gentlemen. So come back next week and see what happens on Critical Hit. And thank you for everyone for being with us these 500 episodes. If you would, when you're out there sharing the show on social medias, use the hashtag Critical Hit and let people know about the show and point them our way. You can point them to majorspoilers.com/Critical Hit for them to find the archive of all the shows, or on Apple Podcasts, or there's a share button right inside your podcast app. So if you're on a particular episode, you can just share that directly to friends. And we certainly appreciate you spreading the word about this show so that we can be here at show 1001. And so until next time, as we've ended almost 500 and plus shows, here's hoping all of your dice rolls are critical hits.
This podcast is copyright 2019 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.